So when you think of the goddess Lakshmi today, you probably get a very specific image in your mind.
A golden deity seated on a lotus, maybe coins are pouring from her hands.
Exactly. She's this embodiment of, wealth, beauty, auspiciousness, and her popularity is just immense.
hmm
She's right there with Vishnu, and her rituals, like the ones during Diwali, are becoming even more central to, say, the modern middle class.
And that familiarity is what makes her history so fascinating because while she feels so present in our modern industrialized world, the word Lakshmi itself is ancient.
It goes way back.
All the way back. It's in the Rig Veda, the earliest texts. But if you actually trace the etymology of the name, the original meaning is startling. It pulls her out of that cosmic divine realm completely.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because the core of this deep dive is really a paradox. The goddess of abstract fortune, of luck, was, according to the research we're looking at, originally something incredibly physical and practical,
A marked or branded animal.
a branded animal. So our mission today is to trace that arc. How does a word go from that to a goddess? And what does that tell you about Vedic society and how they even thought about wealth in the first place?
It all starts with the root word, the linguistic cornerstone.
Right. So where do we start?
We have to start with the word Lakshma.
Lashma. Okay.
It's a noun, and it means a mark, a sign, a token, or some kind of characteristic. Now, if you just add the feminine suffix to that, you get Lakshmi.
So that would mean
It means the one who possesses the mark.
the possessor of the Lakshma. That link seems pretty clear. I'm guessing early scholars probably saw that connection.
Oh, they did, absolutely. Scholars like Oldenburg and others, they recognized this for a long time. The general idea was that this mark meant some kind of innate quality, lucky or unlucky, and Lakshmi was just the personification of that quality.
But if they knew the name came from the mark, why did the whole conversation sort of stall there? Why just focus on this vague idea of luck? What was missing?
Context was missing. They saw the word mark, but they couldn't clearly identify what that physical mark actually was, or, more importantly, where you could find it described in the earliest Vedic texts.
So they jumped straight to the abstract idea.
Exactly. They couldn't root the term in the daily life of the Vedic people. And, that failure to ground the concept just led to all this scholarly disagreement.
Ah, the big debate over whether she was originally a good or a bad sign.
Precisely. You had some scholars arguing she was initially a Lakshmi, an evil sign, maybe a crop disease or an unlucky scar. And then you had others who focused only on the good stuff. But it's a perfect example of what happens when you skip the physical evidence and go straight for the metaphysical.
So we need to find a specific practical context for this mark.
Right. And that context pulls us out of philosophy and drops us right into Vedic life, into an economy that was all about herding and early agriculture. And the key is a very specific, very practical text.
The Gonamika. Tell us about that. Why is it so important here?
The Gonamika is an incredible source. It's a section inside a larger text, the Maitrayani Samhita, and it's basically, it's a manual of cattle keeping.
Wow. An ancient livestock management guide.
You could call it that, yeah. It takes us from abstract philosophy straight into someone's, ancient cattle ledger. And in that text, the definition of Lakshma is completely unambiguous.
No more guessing about luck.
None. It is explicitly a sign of identification and ownership. Something placed on livestock, on cattle, bulls, sheep. And the text doesn't just define it, it stresses how vital it was.
Why so vital?
The text actually says, if the cattle are not so marked, then they would not come back home.
So it wasn't decoration.
Not at all. It was the mechanism to make sure your wealth, your property, returned to you at the end of the day. The mark guaranteed possession, especially when herds were grazing together.
That one detail just makes the whole concept so concrete. She's the guaranteed possession. And the texts get really specific about these marks, right? That they were different for different families or gotras.
Yes, clan names, family lines, each had their own unique mark for identification. But what's really fascinating is the ethical side of it. The manual advises against using sharp weapons or black iron for marking. It calls those methods cruel, or a shant not peaceful.
So branding with a hot iron wasn't the only way.
It seems it wasn't even the preferred way.
So if they couldn't use iron or fire,
Yeah.
how did they do it? How did they make the mark?
The alternative method is just ingenious. It says you should soak a piece of sugarcane stalk in water until it's soft and pliable, and then you pierce the animal's ear with that.
Sugarcane.
Yes. The method was considered auspicious and cool shant, harmless. It was a humane way to create an identifiable mark.
That detail is amazing, but it also creates a bit of a linguistic puddle, doesn't it? It makes
Yeah.
you rethink where the word Lakshmi even comes from.
It does. I mean, if it was only firebranding, you can see the argument that Lakshma comes from the root da, to burn. But with these other methods, piercing, maybe even tattooing or dyeing, the root luch, which just means to mark, makes a lot more sense. It's more encompassing. The core idea is the mark, not how it was made.
Okay, so once we establish that Lakshmi was originally the marked animal, the valuable possession, we can start to see how that evolved into a religious idea. And this is where it gets really interesting for me, because this physical reading suddenly explains Lakshmi's dual nature.
Right. In texts like the Atharva Veda, you see these rites against Nirti, the goddess of destruction, and they mention both a Punya Lakshmi and a Papi Lakshmi.
Good and bad Lakshmi.
For centuries, people just translated that as good luck and bad luck. But if you look at it through this cattle-keeping lens, the meaning just snaps into focus. Punya means good or meritorious. So the Punya Lakshmi was the good animal.
The docile, obedient
The
one.
well-behaved animal that was a valuable possession, the one you wanted to keep.
So the mark wasn't just about ownership, but also about the quality of the animal, its temperament. So then, what was the Papi Lakshmi? The bad marked animal.
Now this is where the Vedic curses get really practical. The text isn't a prayer against abstract bad fortune hitting your enemies.
No.
No. They are literally performing rites to curse the actual vicious, aggressive, mischievous animal, the Papi Lakshmi too, and I'm quoting here, jump forth and be attached to one's enemy.
They were trying to send their problem cows to their neighbors.
Essentially, yes. It's an incredibly practical curse for an agricultural society. It shows that this was all about managing material, physical assets, not just abstract fate.
And that troublesome animal, the Papi Lakshmi, that's the one that eventually becomes Lakshmi, the goddess of misfortune.
That's the theory. She became personified as misfortune and poverty in later ages, and that left only the auspicious, docile aspect, the Punya Lakshmi, to merge with this other goddess, Shri, who represented prosperity, and evolve into the deity we know today.
It's a clean split. The good animals become the goddess of good fortune. The bad animals become the goddess of bad fortune.
A semantic and theological split right down the middle.
So that evolution, from a physical marked animal to the abstract concept of wealth, that has to reflect a huge economic shift in the society. How does one animal, or even a herd of them, come to symbolize all wealth?
Because in that early economy, they were the ultimate measure of wealth. Your status, your power, it was all in your herd. And you see this in the texts. In the Taittiriya Samhita, there's a myth about a great humped bull followed by thousands of cattle. And the whole group is called the thousand-fold Lakshmi.
So Lakshmi becomes a collective noun for the whole herd, for all property.
Exactly.
What's so amazing about this is that this isn't unique to India at all. This is a universal idea. Cattle is currency.
Oh, absolutely. The linguistic parallels across the globe are just undeniable. I mean, think about the Latin word for money, pecunia.
Right. From picutus, a herd of livestock.
Or the English word fee, which is related to the German word for cattle.
And the big one, capital.
The biggest one. It comes from the Latin caput, meaning head, because you were literally counting the heads of chattel or cattle. That was your capital, how many heads you owned.
So what does all this mean? It just confirms this universal journey. The word Lakshmi starts as an animal with a mark of ownership, and it logically develops into wealth, then property, and finally into the abstract ideas of fortune and auspiciousness.
The deification was the final step. The concept of wealth was first given a human form, anthropomorphized, and then finally deified in the later Puranas. That's when she becomes the goddess we recognize.
Hey, before we get to that final transformation, there's one more cultural detail that it fits so perfectly with this whole agricultural origin story.
Yes.
Why is Lakshmi welcomed into the home in the evening? I mean, most important religious rites in Indian traditions happen in the morning.
The answer is so simple, it's beautiful, it's completely rooted in that original context.
The evening is when the cattle come home.
The evening is when the cattle, the literal personified wealth, the Lakshmi return home from the fields. The tradition of lighting lamps to welcome Lakshmi in the evening is a direct cultural fossil from that ancient economy.
The sound of the herd returning was the sound of prosperity arriving, safe and sound. And that tradition just stuck around long after the cattle were replaced by gold coins or, digital currency.
It's a powerful connection. And while the later Purana cemented her place as Vishnu's consort, a connection that took a long time to solidify, By the way, that origin story never really vanished from the rituals. That dramatic story of her emerging from the churning of the ocean, that was a much later addition to the myth.
So we've really taken the full journey here for you, from a simple Lakshma, a mark on a bull's ear in a Vedic field, which is just a practical sign of ownership and quality. That tool of agriculture evolves into a collective idea of wealth, splits into good and bad fortune, and finally merges with another deity, Shri, to become this powerful golden goddess worshipped all over the world.
And that final transformation, her being born from the sea, it leaves us with one last provocative thought.
Okay.
That image of an ocean-born goddess. It's not unique, you see it in other mythologies. The Greek goddess Aphrodite, the Roman Fortuna who became Venus. They were also said to have emerged pure white from the sea.
Which raises a huge question about cultural borrowing versus indigenous tradition.
Right. Is that sea-born goddess image a kind of universal mythological trope that eventually just got attached to this pre-existing, deeply indigenous concept of wealth that came from India's agricultural economy? Was the ancient goddess of the field eventually given a grander, more global origin story to match her growing status? That's something for you to mull over on your own.